And the proper way to release them, as I was saying, you need it to slam forwards, back of your hand, and give it a nice slap like that. Hi, I'm Alex Pitts from the Combined Military Services Museum in Essex. I look after the collection of almost 700 guns, and today we're looking at the MP5 in video games. So the first gun that we're looking at is the MP5 in Counter-Strike. The one I have here is an MP5A3. The one we've looked at is the SD version, so that means that you'd have the suppressor on it. One of the things I'll say is he's got his stock collapsed. Not really the best idea when you're in combat. You probably want to have the stock extended like that, whereas his sort of firing from the hip, probably not the best idea. Other than that, the gun looks very accurate, very correct. There's nothing wrong going on with the reload, is using magazine flapper, the cocking handle. The arc of which the cartridges are coming out from the top of it, maybe not exactly right. They kind of go a bit more of a higher arc, whereas the one in the game seems to sort of dribble out a little bit. But other than that, it looks like a very good, faithful representation of the MP5. Makes perfect sense in Counter-Strike. These are used by counter-terrorist forces by lots of different countries. What we're looking at is, as I mentioned previously, one where a suppressor has been attached to the end of it. We can see that it's glowing bright red. That's definitely not something that would actually happen unless you fire well over 1,000 rounds for it in a row. And even so, with a suppressor, there's not as much friction happening. The suppressor takes the vibrations from the cartridge and suppresses those vibrations, whereas a barrel heating up, which would be more likely to turn red, would be because of the friction the cartridge is having on the rifling in the barrel. That's definitely something you probably would never see. The model that we've got is called a Navy 3-round burst. To me, that would say MP5A5, which would have a trigger group. So this part here, that has an extra bit on the selector for burst fire, as opposed to one like this that just has the 3 positions for semi-auto, full auto, and then the white S is for safe. But I suppose there's nothing wrong with calling it a Navy 3-round burst. It describes what it is, and they were very popular among Navy forces. So one of the other things I've noticed, he did a chamber check. What you can do is, by cocking back the action, just to see if there's a round currently in the chamber. It's for safety purposes. You might need to know if it's in there if you're handing the weapon, putting the weapon down, or back in a safe, or if you're in a combat situation and if you need to know whether to cock it to put the first round in or it's already there. What I will say is, shouldn't do it with an MP5. The way that the mechanism works on these, you shouldn't gently do anything with the cocking mechanism. You need that bolt to be slammed all the way forwards to make sure that when you pull the trigger, the firearm actually goes off. So the way that you should really do it, to give you an idea of when the weapon gets cocked, that has the chamber open, which is this bit here. And the proper way to release them, as I was saying, you need it to slam forwards, back of your hand, and give it a nice slap like that. And that's assured that the bolt is all the way forwards. There is no forward assist on these, so you can't hit it forwards to make sure the bolt goes all the way forwards. The bolt just pulls it back. Never seen it before in a game. A little symbol came up in the corner to say that the gun has jammed. A lot of different things could have affected why the firearm has jammed. One of them could have been that he's checking the chamber and not fully pulling the bolt forwards. Could be that it's an old gun, could be a military surplus one that's been used tens of thousands of rounds, so it could be really unclean. Definitely a really cool feature that they've added to it. Something that makes it different, can make for some very tense situations, I'm guessing. Really good gunplay. Very cool.
Man, what's a few more of these motherfuckers? You make friends wherever you go.
Can you really call it an MP5? I'm not 100%. There's a lot of parts of it that don't resemble an MP5 really in any way. The reload is very HK-esque. I'm guessing they got the idea from Heckler Koch and sort of mishmashed their own version of it together. There's a lot of quirky things going on with it. I know in one of the reloads that he did, when we looked at when you're supposed to hit the slide down, that he sort of just punched it. Even if it was supposed to be based off of a Heckler Koch, you wouldn't end up doing anything because you're pushing it inwards and maybe upwards a bit. So that's definitely not how you'd want to reload one of these. Kind of just a submachine gun as opposed to an MP5 that you can do whatever you like with it, but then that's GTA. You can tell that the people who made this have done a good amount of research into the weapons. I will say the name MP5KA3, there is no MP5KA3. The K series, or Kurz, which is German for short, didn't have an A3 because A3 means collapsing stock. It more closely resembles this, which is the PDW, or personal defense weapon. One of the things as well is we've got a different magazine. This is still a correct magazine. These are the early, what are called waffle magazines. For the very first MP5s that came out, they were using those magazines, but more often than not, you'll see these curved ones on the vast majority of MP5s, but it's good to see a different version of it. We can see whilst watching it that a lot of the stuff, the selector, the cocking handle, is being handled by the character playing it. All of it moves. You've got lots of independent parts about it moving, which is really cool. That's really interesting to have in a game. Gives you an idea that there's a lot that you can do with these. So we've got Ready or Not with one that's been labelled as an A2, but because it's got the burst fire bit on the selector, it'd probably be an A4, or maybe it's a Navy produced one in which they have the same burst fire added onto the fire selector again. Interestingly, we saw someone get shot maybe 2 to 3 times with the MP5 and they're still relatively alive and moving. Looks like they were wearing some sort of bullet resistant armor, whether it's a plate, whether it's soft Kevlar. You can survive being shot by a 9mm multiple times. They're not a particularly potent round. They can kill you in one shot, but at the same time, there have been plenty of cases where people have survived even without body armor of any sort being worn and carried on even fighting after a few shots. So absolutely. We've sprayed all along a wall a line of cartridges. It just goes to show you the accuracy of how good these MP5s are. It's maybe a little too good, but these are very accurate weapons. The bullets would have definitely not penetrated through the wall. It's very unlikely that 9mm would go through what looks like a brick wall of sorts. You'd need something a bit bigger, even bigger than say a 5.56, 7.62, a bit more like it. That will go through the wall and hit your targets, or shrapnel from the wall or the bullet would go through, hit your targets. There's been some strengths and some weaknesses. The GTA 5 one is definitely the one I would probably critique the most. Just didn't play like a real submachine gun, let alone an MP5, whereas on the good side of things, Tarkov looked brilliant. There was lots of little bits that you could do with it, little bits that looked really correct, the handling of it, how the gun functions. I did like the VR version where you can use your fingers to do whatever you like with the gun. In theory, you can use the selector with your hand, pull the bolt back however you like. The other games were also good for their representations of the MP5, but definitely I'd probably put Tarkov at the top.
For more videos like this one, make sure to check out our Expert React playlist or subscribe.